Hello, welcome back to a YouTube video. Today I'm doing 25.22 ADC tier list, serve driver content, like subscribe, and let's get into it. There are actually no direct changes towards ADC this patch. Most of those are going to be coming in 25.23, where we are seeing notable nerfs towards the likes of Caitlyn, Kai'Sa, Ashe, and Jinx. That is the four most popular marksmen in Gold Plus at the moment, and all four are being hit. They are buffing some up to kind of like shake around the meta. Jhin is being buffed. I believe MF is receiving a very slight buff to her ultimate. We are also seeing Tristana get 0.4 AD growth, and Xayah gain a small bit of power, I believe, through the W, or she's gaining some slight power. I don't specifically remember where the direct buffs towards Xayah are. They are also nerfing Hui. Hui notably is quite strong in mid, but also pretty sleeper strong in bot lane at the moment, so that will definitely impact him here. And Mel is receiving a shift around in power. They are trying to push it away from being so clearly that like Emax is stronger, as most people still in solo queue don't max E, and pushing power towards the passive, so that's going to be a power shift which will be noticeable in the next patch. Let's get into it. So the actual direct kind of like change, I guess, which impacts ADC this patch was Bloodline got slightly buffed. It's very minimal. It basically doesn't change the like meta at all. Like I believe the lowest pick rate Bloodline ADC is Varus, and then the highest I believe is Samira. And Varus is going to get slightly weaker with other champions around him getting slightly stronger. He was already on the weaker side. He doesn't suddenly like shift his placement too aggressively. And then Samira was she's going to gain from it, but she's not going to gain a huge amount. It's a very small buff towards the lifesteal on that. Yeah, doesn't really shift around the meta. So let's get into it. Oh, another thing to note in 20.23 is Swain is being buffed. That'll be pretty big. I imagine Swain will probably overtake Hui. It's probably being my number one recommended mage in the bot lane. The buff is sizable. I believe it's to his Q, and he is gaining mana cost decrease and gaining power through that spell. So yeah, very notable in that regard. The D tier is empty. I moved all the champions out of here. The C tier then, we lead with Varus, Kalista, and Corki. This is like the fake D tier, I guess you could say. I don't think these champions are unpickable anymore. Like, I think all three of these can be fine if you're comfortable on them. Kalista has been buffed quite a few times now to kind of enable her to be playable in average brackets. She still doesn't perform well, and I still don't really recommend her, but she does have a sizable amount of AD growth now, and being able to just like get big amounts of power through leveling up and just being able to be more powerful throughout the game in the kind of like elo bracket where games are going longer, it's helpful. That being said, though, she's still reliant on being like able to snowball her early game, and you still are going to want strong pairings with the champion. And if you're not comfortable with that, then I do think she is just not as good as other options around her. Corki's just over nerfed for competitive presence. He has lost a decent chunk of his power, and albeit he's still a relatively like simplistic early game like marksman, which I think is unique in the way he functions, he's definitely a lot weaker than he had been, and it makes him a lot less appealing to recommend as an option. Varus, I think, is just the worst ADC at the moment. Honestly, I could probably even drop Varus down to a D tier. He's really performing quite badly in solo queue. The lethality build just isn't given the time to really be useful in a lot of games, and on hit just ends up making him weaker than like a lot of the other on hit marksmen, when you'd rather just be playing something else than Varus. Like the selling point at that point would just be the ultimate, and the fact that he does obviously like a relatively good amount of mixed damage from the get-go, those are like the big strengths of the champion. The other picks within the C tier are the likes of Xayah, who's being buffed next patch. Good to see. I think Xayah in solo queue has just been weak for a while. She's too dependent on certain archetypes to really be pickable consistently, and I think that is a really big like, I mean, it's just rough for a marksman to be in that situation. She's one of the most counterpick dependent marksmen, if not just the most counterpick dependent marksman in the game at the moment, which yeah does end up putting her in this like rough spot, especially for solo queue. Samira is doing better. I mean, you're still not really going to be playing Samira and Draven for that matter unless you're like really comfortable with the archetype of champion, snowballing your like early game advantages. If you are, I think they're still like decent picks. Like, they are better than they had been. Both of them got buffed in more recent patches, and yeah, I'd say she remains as like this. I have her in the C tier. I think she could compete with the B tier options. She could also just remain in the C tier. It really just depends on like what you're pairing her with. She is also just reliant on like certain pairings. If you pair her with like a lot of the enchanters which are popular at the moment across like different servers, then you end up in this rough spot where she loses a lot of the games where you might even consider her viable. So that is definitely like a mark against the champion. And then the other two picks are Ezreal and Yunara. Yunara is definitely like increasing as the patches go by. I think like you could honestly like bump her up to the beta and it's like reasonable. She does have a mastery curve though, and the lower down you go, the less people are going to be progressed on that mastery curve. The higher elo you go, the better she is. She is one of the best marksmen in elite brackets at the moment. For average brackets, she still underperforms, and yeah, that is going to be the case for a bit when she like starts gaining some of that back. I imagine by next patch you could definitely see her in the beta, especially with some of the like more popular marksmen being nerfed around her. I mean, Ezreal, the AD growth buff was nice. I still think he's like a weak option. He still has issues with his itemization, and unless you're really comfortable with the champion, I wouldn't really recommend him. But he's definitely doing a bit better, and yeah, I think he sits quite nicely in the C tier. Some of the options which I feel like could also be dropped down to the C tier include the likes of Jhin and Draven. Jhin has just been underperformant for a while now. I have him as like a low B tier, but like the bleed through from the like the end of the C to the D tier, and then the top of the C to the B tier, and then the bottom of the B to the C tier, it's very close. Like I don't think there's a huge amount like separating them outside of obviously just being in a different tier. But yeah, Jhin is getting buffed next patch. It's good to see. The buff is pretty sizable. It's like 10 flat damage on W and some more power in the passive. So yeah, we'll be doing better with that. Right now, he kind of sits as being just a bit too underwhelming. Doesn't have the same level of DPS output a lot of the other marksmen do. But I mean, obviously, like the key factor is like his damage. If you are able to play him into compositions which have poor tools at dealing with him just outputting the damage which he wants to output, he can be really oppressive in that regard. Obviously, you are playing more around the fact that he is utility outputs, which is a really like big strength of the champion, but he is definitely on the weaker side at the moment. Draven is like he's kind of like Samira, where they are both really reliant on explosive volatility and being able to kind of like take over the game through early advantages. If you're comfortable with that, I think they're great options. If you're not, then they just end up being weaker than the other marksmen around them because they just don't scale like as well. So that is like the limitations of the champions. They also traditionally want certain pairings to make like just amplify their strengths as champions, and that can also be like a weakness of these picks if you are just like consistently blinding them or just picking them every game. Aphelios, I like him as an option. I think he's a good scaling like skill expressive marksman. He's unique in the way he functions, and that kind of limits him from being ever like in the A and the S tier unless he's like blatantly overpowered. Right now I say he's good. He's a good option. If you enjoy the champion, you should play him. If you want to learn him, I think that's perfectly reasonable as well. There are good amounts of Aphelios spots where you can get a lot of value and damage out of the champion. Veigar is fine. Like the champion's how would I describe it? He's found himself in a pretty awkward spot for like just like bot lane in general. He has had a lot of his power obviously shifted into level scaling to try and get him out of like being the really oppressive bot lane mage he has. As a consequence, it's made him even more innately low elo skewed. So I think the lower down you go, the better of an option this is. If you are looking for early game power, though, Veigar is not that kind of pick. You are going to be in a pretty rough spot for a while until you are able to get like your first items and components to really like be able to fight back if anything. Caitlyn getting nerfed pretty heavily next patch, which is interesting to see. She sits at like the high end of the B tier because I do think you have to. Well, I mean, I think there is two ways of looking at Caitlyn. One is you're just playing the scale up. I will get the 4 items and I will just one-shot everyone with my headshots kind of build, which is the better kind of way. I mean, it's probably the better way to think about the champion for average brackets. It's more consistent in that regard. I don't like thinking about the champion like that because I think you should exploit the fact that she is a 650 range marksman and you should abuse the early game power through that. If you don't, then I think she just ends up being not as good as some of the other options. You are a bit too dependent on just getting to your 3-4 item spikes. But if you're good at both, then she's a great champion at the moment. But it makes sense that Riot would want to nerf her, albeit I think it's too much. And I think if they were, I think it's the right direction. I think they should nerf down but obnoxious, like, I'm just gonna like E headshot, like E backwards, E forwards, headshot you for like 90% of your health bar because that's just like the play pattern of the champion later on into the game. And I think right now, I think that is correct, but they should also shift power back into like other aspects of her kit. Obviously, we've seen like what shifting ult power back, shifting back power into the ultimate does, where you have the obnoxious like first strike lethality Caitlyn build. Probably not a good idea to go in that direction, but yeah, she's being nerfed heavily. Like I would probably start to like look towards other options if you do play Caitlyn at the moment. Lucian and Zeri, I think both of these are pretty solid marksmen. Zeri's actually being buffed next patch. Lucian, it's just a case of being really comfortable with the play pattern of the champion. And in the case of Zeri, if you can... I mean, she's really bursty at the moment, and I think Riot have noticed that and kind of want to shift her play pattern back towards being a bit more extended combat. The buff is nice. It's going to be... it's going to enable you to kite a bit more easily. Will it suddenly make her one of the best marksmen in the game? Probably not, but she'll definitely benefit from it. I could imagine her being a pretty solid A tier champion next patch. So if you enjoy the pick, then yeah, I think it's worth playing her. And even at the current patch, I still think she's a pretty solid option. She does a lot of just burst damage, and her general sustain pattern is still not bad. It's just not as good as it has been in previous iterations. Probably not what the champion desires as of the moment. The A tier then, I'm dropping Senna down to the B tier. Senna just... she's not bad. I don't think she's a terrible option. And she kind of like Jhin is another utility option within the marksman role. But she also just falls a bit short compared to some of the options in the A and the S tier. I do think some of these are pretty clearly strong options, which I would recommend at the moment. Whether it's because they really dominate in solo queue, or whether it's just the low mastery curve requirement to kind of access them. I think there are multiple reasons for it. But yeah, Senna at the moment, she's fine. I just describe her as fine. I think if you're comfortable with the champion, she can be pretty solid. If you're not, then I don't think she's the greatest pick to be playing at the moment. But yeah, you can't really go massively wrong with the champion. So the A tier then, we lead off with some of the AP options. Those include the likes of Swain, Seraphine, Mel, and... wow, I'm getting rid of brand. What's that? Oh, wait, I don't mean to include Huawei. So, is that before? Missing one. Ziggs. Alright. So, in the case of Seraphine, she's a great jack of all trades champion. Really solid at being able to just provide good utility to the team, solid damage, and generally the recent buffs were really nice for her. She finds herself as an alright A tier champion. I think she, just kind of lingers around here. Probably the lowest of the A tier options. I think Ziggs is better than her. I would recommend Ziggs more often than I'd probably recommend Seraphine. I think Seraphine, if you can get the pairings for her, can be really good. I think Ziggs just generally has really nice amounts of damage and just does but he's really unassailable as a champion. I think that's a really big strength of the pick at the moment, where you can just sit back and clear waves and just be a nuisance within the game. And Mel is Mel is for sure an S tier champion at the moment. The only limitation is obviously the fact that people still max Q. Hopefully, next patch, I will no longer need to complain about that, because Emax will be considerably weaker. They are nerfing the CC duration with points in that ability, which is meaningful. It is going to definitely impact it. I imagine it will probably bring Q and Emax back to being relatively similar in power level, but it is definitely something to note. In the case of Swain, he's being buffed next patch. It's a nice buff. I could honestly see him also being bumped up to the S tier. He's still going to be to an extent conditional. You'll want to play him into compositions with low amounts of damage and pretty melee heavy. That is going to be where he really shines as a pick. But generally, even the Summonary version of Swain, I think just broadly does pretty solid at the moment, so it's interesting to see him get buffed. I won't complain though. I think Swain is a cool champion in the game, and he is, remains in the A tier for the moment, but might even get bumped up to the S tier next patch. So the marksman options include the likes of Twitch and so Twitch, really solid, just solo queue marksman. He's got both the AP and the AD variants, which he can opt into depending on what he wants to do within the game, and I think both are viable bot lane. And yeah, I'd say he's just a pretty solid A tier solo queue option. You can snowball advantages really nicely on this champion. He's a bit niche compared to the rest of the marksman pool, playing a bit more like an assassin rather than an upfront marksman, but he has strengths in both, and I think he's a very solid A tier option at the moment. Some of your more melee-focused marksmen are your Nylas and your Yasuos. Both these picks, I think, are pretty solid at the moment. They traditionally end up being a bit predicated on certain pairings, though. If you don't get the, knock-up synergy with Yasuo, then he is obviously limited in what he can do. In the case of Nyla, she has certain enchanter pairings which she really benefits from, but things like Tarak Nyla and Senna Nyla are always things which come to mind when thinking about this champion. She's obviously incredibly unpopular, but that is also to the strength of the champion. People don't understand how to play against it that well. Justana is getting buffed next patch, and even this patch, I'd say she's a pretty solid marksman. Good scaling, generally has really good snowball potential as well, good burst through the bomb, good siege as well. She's just a really solid all-rounder, and the buff is going to help her scaling, which I think, was already pretty solid at. So yeah, going to continue to be a very good marksman. Will probably get bumped back up to the S tier, I imagine. Sivir is fine. She's ended up, after the nerf, she's just ended up being this She's hard to recommend, honestly. Like, I think she has good spots, but there are just better generic marksmen to be playing at the moment. I think unless Sivir is strong, almost to like the point of almost being just overpowered, she just ends up being a bit less recommendable than some of the other options around her. Obviously, the big strength of Sivir is like having access to the spell shield and having pretty unassailable wave clear. That is like the core things of the pick, but definitely, like with the recent nerfs to her Q, falls into this more like, I'd say she's still a good champion, but not quite as good as some of the other options, which I have slightly higher than her. And then Vayne and Kai'Sa, I think people gradually have been catching onto the, I mean, I say gradually, people have known that Kai'Sa's been pretty strong for a while now. Ever since they buffed Kraken, she's really just been thriving as a bot lane option. Incredibly popular, incredibly dominant when paired with the right things and into the right compositions. She has really good mixed damage as well, makes it quite hard to itemize against her. And generally just having that much damage output combined with the mobility she has makes her a really solid option at the moment. When she ends up being weaker, it's traditionally because one of her aspects just ends up lacking a bit more. They are nerfing her, I believe, durability and ult CD, so that is going to punish her in some of these like dive-in angles. But generally, I still think she'll be a pretty solid marksman. Maybe falls towards the middle of the A tier, but yeah, still really good at the moment, so sits within the A tier. And then Vayne. Vayne's really going to be thriving next patch. I think the nerfs to some of the like popular champions around her really allows her to like stand up as a great option. Even now, she's an incredible option for solo queue, being able to kind of she really doesn't get punished in lane hard enough for how well she can like fight through the mid game into the late game. She can be really oppressive in that guard. Obviously, she lacks the wave clear a lot of other champions have, which is going to be one of the big weaknesses of the champion, combined with like her shorter range. But like, most people won't punish her in average brackets, and it makes her incredibly powerful in this kind of elo. So, yeah, Vayne sits within the A tier, might get bumped up to the S tier, kind of, like, depending on how the meta shifts going into next patch. So, the S tier options, I have 5 of them. That includes the likes of Ashe, who is probably my number 1. Actually, I probably started the wrong direction here. She is getting nerfed next patch, pretty sizable on the Q. The pick has, I think, over time, like, caught on. I think especially towards the end of Worlds where people started playing it, that's when like other people were like, oh, okay, this champ's actually really strong at the moment. Obviously it pairs really nicely with certain supports, but as a standalone marksman, having the ability to kind of set fights up by yourself with your ulti, provide vision, having the utility she does, makes her really solid at the moment. I think she's a great S tier option, especially with like the low barrier to entry she has, which does make her quite appealing as just like a recommendation option. Smolder, this champion's still really good at the moment, scales really nicely. It's just about getting to your like breakpoints, your items, and your like stacks. This champion will be better in lower brackets because the games just go longer, and he really benefits from that, being able to gain like more consistently get to his execution threshold, and it makes him a great S tier option. Some of your more niche ones are Hui and Kog'Maw. Hui is the number 1 mage in bot lane at the moment. He is incredibly strong, and I have caught on to the fact that he's really strong. I mean, he's strong in both mid and bot, but this pick, yeah, it's going to have his wave clear tapped down slightly. The QE is losing a lot of power through the points, and it's like 700 AP until you get to the break point again, so pretty it's basically unlikely, basically impossible, but you're going to get to it. Jesus, English. Anyway, yeah, probably my number 1 AP option. He's still performing really well at the moment. A great champion to kind of like opt into if you enjoy it. Kog'Maw is the number 1 like on hit marksman at the moment. Even with the recent nerfs, he still performs really well. He's niche and unpopular, and that, like, if you don't enjoy the champion, then you probably won't play it, but he's still really good, and I still think you should play it if you find the spots where Kog'Maw looks really good for you. MF, getting slightly buffed next patch. It's very small, it's not going to really do anything, but she was already good, so it's surprising to see her get buffed. It's probably just it's a placebo buff to just give her some more popularity. I still think you should play MF if you are like beginning to like go on your ADC journey. I think things like Ashe, MF are great options for that. And then Jinx is the number 3 of the like what I'd call the package deal, like when you are playing bot lane. She is getting nerfed next patch. It's a slight ulti nerf. It'll probably bring her back down to the S tier, but right now she is still like the definitive marksman, which I'd recommend. Great snowball potential, relatively good across most stages of the game, and yeah, it scales incredibly well with gold. It just makes her the the perfect all-round marksman package. She does the limitation of Jinx is obviously she's immobile, and that is always going to be the limitation. It makes her more assailable to assassins and easier to get onto, but if you have the peel and like the setup around you, she's an incredible option, and I do think she sits as kind of like the definitive S plus option at the moment. But the nerf will probably bring her a bit more in line. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.